Welcome to Jamaica, Rising and Resilient. A conversation between Hope Knight and Carla Harris. And introducing Justin Rodgers. Justin Rodgers is a go-to source and expert on real estate, economic development, government process, and leadership. He was recently named interim president and CEO of Greater Jamaica Development Corporation. Trusted by the community, Justin has extensive contacts with community leaders, government officials, business leaders, and area stakeholders. His insight and leadership has facilitated extensive investment in development projects in the area, including commercial, mixed-income housing, and hospitality. Justin's professional experience spans the nonprofit and corporate sectors, including time at Morgan Chase. He has received numerous awards, including the Queen's Courier Rising 40 Under 40 Stars, the Network Journal 40 Under 40 List, and City and State's Queensborough Influential 50. His vision is shaped by 6 years of mentorship by Hope Knight, more than 15 years of experience at GJDC, and his intimate knowledge of Southeast Queens. Hope Knight, selected by Governor Hochul in November 2021 as President and CEO designate at Empire State Development and acting New York State Commissioner of Economic Development. While President and CEO of Greater Jamaica Development Corporation from 2015 to 2021, Hope's vision and commitment to the downtown was a critical element in the successful revitalization and the attraction of over $1 billion in public and private funding to the area. A member of many boards and advisory councils, Hope's input is constantly sought by leaders in the public and private sector. Carla Harris, Vice Chair and Managing Director at Morgan Stanley. Carla Harris has extensive industry experience in the technology, media, retail, transportation, industrial, and healthcare sectors. Appointed by President Obama in 2013 as chair of the National Women's Business Council, Carla has also been named to Fortune magazine's list of the 50 most powerful Black executives in corporate America, and their list of 25 most powerful women in finance. An acclaimed singer, she has performed 5 sold-out concerts at Carnegie Hall and authored 2 books on career success.
Before I introduce Hope and Carla, I want to thank our sponsors for their generosity. And now it's my pleasure to bring a conversation between Hope Knight and Carla Harris.
Good evening, Carla. How are you?
I am great, Hope. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for doing this. And I wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about some of your rich and insightful pearls and give folks a little bit of some perspective of how you think about things. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things about the internet is that the videos that are about you live there forever. And so I know that people have seen the video where you talk about what you would have told your 25-year-old self, right? Yes. And so, some of the things you said were own your own power, be willing to take risks, be Carla, be yourself, find comfort in your own skin, celebrate your victories. Remember that if you don't ask, you don't get. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you would change and give yourself sort of additional advice to your 25-year-old self? You probably a little ways out from when you talked about that. So what give me some additions to what you would tell yourself?
Yes, absolutely. I love that question, Hope. And I think I'm about 5 years out from the last time or the first time that I gave that speech. And I'll tell you that there's nothing that I would change. If anything, I would amplify those messages, especially in the time that we're in right now. And there's one thing I probably would add, because obviously nobody anticipated a COVID-19 crisis or the kind of social unrest on the back of racial inequities that we saw in this country and frankly around the world over the last 18 months. So I would say also dare to take the risk to be creative, to paint your own picture of the future. This is the first time, Hope, that I would argue that we have had a truly globally shared experience, because there isn't a person on the planet that hasn't been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, a person on the planet that hasn't felt some kind of way on the back of witnessing the social unrest. But it is also the first time, I would argue, that we've really had an opportunity to paint the picture. Nobody has the playbook on how you should engage with customers, how you should approach the market on the other side of a global pandemic. So now is the time, I would say to the young Carla, and I say to the seasoned Carla, don't wait for someone to dictate to you how things should happen, because nobody has the playbook. So take a blank sheet of paper approach as you think about 22 and paint the picture and participate in the conversation around creating the future vision as opposed to allowing it to be dictated to you.
And so, Carla, when you talk about painting the picture yourself, what are some of the things that you would have done at 25?
Oh, absolutely. At 25, I would have gone to my boss and I would have said, now that we are doing what we're doing now with respect to how we're working, what are we saying to our clients about how they should be thinking about the future? How can we add value around relationships, partnerships, collaborations? This is something I've been thinking about since we've been in this shelter in place protocol. So I would have been much more proactive in thinking about new ways to connect, new ways to leverage technology, because I would imagine, Hope, that at 25, I'd be far more adept at technology than I am today at, the age where I've had to learn a few things. So I would be much more proactive about that at 25. And frankly, I'm being proactive about it now in terms of helping clients think through how they might want to manage their workforce in a hybrid environment, how they might think about positioning themselves differently as leaders, how they can be more inclusive than they were before we went into this shelter in place protocol. So the more seasoned Carla is behaving the way the 25-year-old Carla would behave in this space.
That's terrific. When I think about what I would have done differently with my 25-year-old self, I definitely would have taken more risk, right? I would have taken more risk and I would have thought about the journey as opposed to the goal. Because so it was so much in a rush to get to the goal, kind of lost sight of the journey and, all that comes with, getting to the next place. And so I try, my more seasoned age to really be comfortable and take risk in the journey while I'm trying to get to the goal.
I guess appreciating the journey, isn't that fair, Hope? Because I think I knew you at 25, and you had some amazing goals, and you were very directed with respect to achieving them. But I could concede the fact that perhaps we didn't appreciate the value of the things that we were going through or that we learned in the journey. And I'd say that's even valuable today. Is that a fair point?
I think it's a fair point, because when I look back on the journey, there were a lot of things along the way that have given me, the skills, capabilities, and sensibilities to do what I've been able to do over the last couple of decades.
Yes. So let's fast forward a couple of years, if I might. You were named President and CEO of Greater Jamaica Development Corp in 2015, after having served as the Chief Operating Officer of the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone. So I have a few questions for you there. What were your impressions of downtown Jamaica and Southeast Queens when you got there, is one question. And what did you see as your most fundamental revitalization challenge?
So, one of the things I always tell people is that when I took the train into Jamaica and walked the corridor when I was in the recruiting process, it felt very much like Harlem, circa, kind of 2003. The revitalization had not kicked into full gear, definitely saw tremendous potential. Um, there were some real assets here in Jamaica. Um, Tremendous transportation infrastructure, lots of public investment, lots of large parcels of land that were ripe for development. And so, with that combination of assets, I thought that, there was a real opportunity to create development of scale, mostly, looking at residential development, mixed income housing that could be accessible to a wide range of incomes. So, folks from lots of walks of life could be able to access housing, in a mixed income context. And so I felt like it was really important to, identify developers that had experience in similarly situated communities and be able to get development happening quickly. Because I felt like if there was some momentum, then other investment capital would come. And that's exactly what happened.
And you were proven right. So, we both know that there's so many things that happen in your life that may not make sense today, but they're preparing you for the next thing. So talk a little bit about how your experience at UMES shaped your vision and your strategy that you deployed, because you hit the ground running when you got to Queens.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I tell the story a lot. So what happens in many communities is that one of the most significant needs is, employment opportunities for the folks that live there. And so what you want to try to do is bring businesses, commercial office to a community to really connect those employment opportunities to the residents that live there. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to attract businesses when there's no service infrastructure in place, right? So, businesses want to have access to restaurants and other kinds of services, entertainment infrastructure, so that their employees feel like they can access things after work and during the workday, right? And so unless you have that, it's very difficult to bring in large employers to a community. The only way you get that is if you have the residential density that can support those kinds of establishments. And so I knew from UMES that in Upper Manhattan, you really needed to create that service entertainment infrastructure before you could really attract business and commercial office to a community. And that was kind of one of the biggest learnings. And that's why we really pursued a residential development strategy. And so what's happening is that people are starting to live here. So this is becoming more of an 18-hour-a-day community. COVID's upended a lot of these plans. I know that this community will begin to see more restaurants and more service businesses, more, like I said, entertainment infrastructure. So that will then create the basis for being able to attract more commercial interest into this community.
That's brilliant. The strategy is so clear, and the ordinary eye wouldn't see that, but the experienced style like yours certainly could see that, and I could see how you have deployed and developed that strategy. Now enter COVID-19, and you just said that COVID-19 upended everything, and so it did. So talk a little bit about what happened in Southeast Queens, and what did the Greater Jamaica Development Corp do to mitigate some of the harm?
Right. So COVID-19 was devastating to this community. First of all, it was a very high incidence of infection, and unfortunately that follows death. And so this community was really devastated by the pandemic. And then just like all over the country, small businesses were significantly impacted. First of all, because they had to close. And then when they were able to open, they had to open under very specific conditions. Greater Jamaica Development Corporation we were involved in helping get PPE to businesses so that they could open safely and responsibly. We were able to help connect businesses to all the resources that were available. In the first case, it was the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, and helping businesses who might not have necessarily had all of their paperwork, books, and records together to access those programs. We really helped them, kind of pull the information together so that they could participate in the programs. And then, going, kind of further into 2020, there were lots of grant programs available, and we were also able to build on, kind of the PPP and the documentation needed to access that program to the same documentation needed to access some of these grant programs. So really creating a bridge for these businesses while they were building back their customer bases.
Well, Hope, I spend a lot of time, and I have spent a lot of time talking to CEOs over the last 18 months that we've been in this shelter-in-place protocol. And I'll tell you that while there are some things that people are concerned about, there's certainly a feeling of what I like to call on the street cautious optimism. Because obviously we have been in an environment where interest rates have been at historic lows, which has made financing much cheaper to be able to access. There are, whether it's retail companies or other companies, financial services companies that frankly have had record years in 2020. And I think you're going to see that again in 2021, if I could predict a little bit. But I think, things like the supply chain is concerning people. The geopolitical environment that we're in concerns people with respect to what's going to happen country to country. Obviously, there with the new administration, you worry a little bit about taxes. You've heard a lot of conversation around inflation, but a big worry now increasingly is the labor shortage. And you've talked about some of the small businesses, having to rebuild, but something that's kind of looming as a potential threat is, even though the demand may come back from the consumers, and I think the consumer will emerge as strong because, let's face it, people have had 20 months where they really haven't spent any money. So it's not far-fetched to think that there's available capital, especially among consumers right now, to spend money, and people clearly are dying to get out and to move about. So that should bode well for small businesses. But the labor issue is something that's on the mind of CEOs of large organizations and CEOs of smaller and emerging businesses. So how do you see that? I'm sure you see the same thing in Jamaica.
No, absolutely see it in Jamaica. And, one of the things that I'm starting to think about is this mismatch, because there are millions of jobs available, but, we all talk about this skills gap. So the folks that are looking don't have the skills to access those opportunities. I think there's going to come a time where we go back to the past where businesses are really going to have to actually do the training. We've gotten to a place where businesses are relying on other institutions to provide training to folks so that they can access their opportunities. It was not so long ago when you went to a business and you either got into a training program or an apprenticeship. There was some way that the business provided you with the skills and opportunity while you were employed to be prepared for these employment opportunities that they need to be filled. And so maybe we'll get there at some point, but I think the way it's working now, it's not happening.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I've certainly seen over the last, I'm going to say, decade and a half, companies have sort of moved away from that general training, and there's an expectation, and frankly, they were looking for people who walked in with the skills. But I think the rate of innovation is such that things are changing so quickly, it's going to be hard to find the folks to fill the need. So you're right. I think companies are going to start to have to, that's a good forecast, that companies will start to have to reinvest in training. And you're right, it used to be the case that your first 3 to 6 months, you were training.
That's right.
So you're right. I think that's fair.
So I want to go back to something that you talked about because I know um, a very central point of what you just really mentioned was um, people do not like uncertainty, right? The markets don't like it. We as humans don't like it. And unfortunately, it feels like we are in times of tremendous uncertainty. How do you think we should respond to that?
Yes. Well, I think we should all, first of all, look at how we have responded over the last 18 months. So I tell people while there's still a lot of uncertainty out there, think about your truth of what has transpired. We have all been far more resilient than we probably would have given ourselves credit for. We have learned how to pivot on a dime. We have learned how to be creative, how to manage through shortages or things that, are just not available. We've learned different ways of communicating, different ways of engaging, of delivering on value. So I'd say the way we should think about uncertainty is to look at it as an opportunity to innovate. We don't know what's going to transpire, but if we take a blank sheet of paper approach to how we might solve problems or how we might stay more nimble or more agile, then I think we're going to be very surprised at what comes on the other side of that. But the thing is, we shouldn't fear the uncertainty. We just went through 18 months of clear uncertainty. We had no idea how fast the virus was going to spread. We had no idea what might happen if you got it and if you even survived. We had no idea when we were actually going to get a vaccine. We had no idea about the efficacy of the vaccine. I can go on and on. We had no idea when our kids would go back to school, how we would manage it if they went back to school. Again, I could go on and on about all the uncertainty that we had in front of us, and yet we prevailed. Yet we were resilient. Yet we figured it out. So the conclusion is we should not fear uncertainty and change the way we have traditionally dealt with it or feared it. And we should think about it as an opportunity to harness innovation, because innovation sped up during this period. If you think about it, Hope, there were cultures that needed to be transformed. We all knew it, but we were all doing well. And, the prevailing attitude ain't broke, don't fix it. But it needed fixing. But look how fast we responded. Look how we have created change. Look how we're doing things differently and talking about things differently because of what transpired. So we ought to look at this as an opportunity to continue the momentum of accelerating change and innovation and not be constrained by that which we cannot see.
That is so true. And so in wrapping this conversation up, I want you to also talk about how you think diversity is going to support this, rapid rate of change in this relatively, kind of uncertain environment, right?
Yes, I think diversity is critical, and it is going to be the competitive edge. And here is the business imperative around it. So let's go back to the innovation point that I just talked about. And if you agree with me that innovation is the dominant competitive parameter across all industries and in every ecosystem, then here's the imperative around diversity. You need a lot of different ideas in the room in order to get to that one idea that can be the innovative idea that will allow you to obtain and retain a leadership position in your industry. Well, if you need a lot of ideas in the room, you need a lot of perspectives in the room, because just like innovation is born from ideas, well, ideas are born from perspectives. And if you need a lot of perspectives in the room, you need a lot of experiences in the room, because perspectives are born from experiences. And if you need a lot of experiences in the room, you better start with a lot of different people in the room, because experiences are born from people. So you must start with a lot of different people in the room in order to get to that one innovative idea that will allow you to obtain and retain a leadership position in your organization or in that industry. That is the commercial imperative around diversity, especially as we go forward. It is not a nice to have. It is not a right thing to do. It is a commercial imperative.
So the headline here is that we need a lot of different people in the room.
Amen.
So Carla, thank you so much for giving us some of your wisdom. I know people will be able to take this back with them in, whatever it is that they're doing, and wishing you a wonderful holiday season.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Hope, and all the best to you and your family as well.
I'm so proud of the work that we're doing here in Southeast Queens. If you haven't already done so, please consider supporting these activities by contributing to GJDC. Just go to our website at gjdc.org and follow the link to this event, or simply by pressing the Support GJDC button on your screen. We have exciting plans for 2022, and we know you'll be hearing a lot of great things about Southeast Queens and GJDC. Thank you, and stay tuned.